The first piece that I'm going to read is a poem entitled Robbed. And there's a little backstory to it that I'd like to share. And that is in 2010, my family received word that we had a previously unknown genetic heart defect that could cause, among other things, sudden cardiac death, particularly in athletes. And I was the first one diagnosed with that, and then other family members as well, including my mother and my sons. And needless to say, it changed our lives profoundly. One of my sons had to give up a number of the sports that he loved so dearly, but continued to support his high school teams. And this is a piece that was written about an opening day game that took place in December of 2012. So again, it's called Robbed. And it's in honor of Albert Martin. A robbery took place in early December 2012. A boy on the cusp of manhood, doing the thing he loved most, living the only life he knew, playing, excelling, reveling. There were witnesses, among them my son, who watched as Albert fell, as the life he savored began to slip away and then disappeared into the night. There were witnesses, Albert's mother, his classmates, teammates, and my son, whose own life had been shattered not long before, whose own mother had collapsed similarly but rose. Who knows why? Who knows why? But not Albert. He lay motionless on the gymnasium floor, motionless except for the efforts to steal him back, frantic efforts made in vain. And just the same, he vanished. Before 100 pairs of stunned eyes, before 100 pounding hearts, there was a robbery and a witness. And Albert, he could not be saved, could not be stolen back. Who knows why? Who knows why? One boy gone, another forever changed. Who knows why? The next piece I wanted to do is a short story that I've written called May I Have This Dance. On April 11th, 2010, while in the midst of training for a half marathon, I collapsed on the practice course set up by race officials. In a split second, the life I had known for 45 years was over. I would learn in the weeks that followed that I would never run again, would never compete in another triathlon, biathlon, or any other kind of race. I would never skydive, surf, ski, or even swim freestyle again. G-forces were out, so even roller coasters were a thing of the past. Some of these activities I had not done in years, may never have done again. But nonetheless, the idea that they were permanently checked off my list by some force that could come along and shut me down in an instant was unimaginable. It felt as if the music of my life had been silenced in a sudden crash. Over the course of the next year, so many other storms would arrive. My mother's diagnosis of the same heart disease, my son's, my diagnosis of breast cancer, my mother's sudden cardiac death at the age of 69, a double mastectomy, that I would barely have time to register all that was happening when yet another tsunami would slam ashore, destroying everything in its path. When the waves stopped crashing, the water finally receded, I crawled into bed and cried in the dark for 2 solid months. I was paralyzed. Hanging on the edge of nothingness, splayed open like the deer in my neighbor's yard, ground to dust. When I finally came to and cared enough to ask my doctors for the list of the limitations on my heart, they said it would be easier to tell me what I could do than what I could not. Fine, have it your way, I thought. I readied my pen. Turns out I wouldn't need it. Who can't remember 3 things? Bowl, golf, walk. That was what my life was now reduced to. Bowl, golf, walk. I felt as if I was drowning. I've always been an active person, though I came to running and competing later in life. But I've always been hiking, biking, swimming, for as long as I can remember. I was an active child, never content to just sit, always running and jumping, always playing outside. I had no idea how I would adjust to this new life, emotionally or physically. Yes, of course I was grateful to still be alive. Of course I knew about all the other ways in which one can lose the ability to live on their own terms. Of course I could see how lucky I was. It was something of a miracle that I had survived this heart event at all. If only that knowledge somehow made this hurt less. If only it made it somehow easier to bear. Last November, a dear friend's husband lost his battle with brain cancer. We remained close as she went through this trying time. We sat in radiology waiting rooms together, in church pews praying for healing and then for mercy, pulled long shifts in hospice. Since his death, we have gone to the movies, meandered through bookstores, taken long walks. We even went away for a spa weekend. It was there that I would discover her secret past, that long before she ever met and married her husband, she was an avid dancer. I was surprised to find that my reserve friend had traveled all over the country, dancing for years, everything from folk to ballroom, and that salsa was her favorite. She said she had given it up when she and her husband met, as he was not a dancer, and try as he might, bless his heart, he just could not get the rhythm. She had been considering going back to it before he was diagnosed, and then had to put that idea on a shelf to care for him during his illness and until his death. She told me how dancing had always made her feel alive, was nourishment for her soul, and how she needed that now more than ever. I urged her to return, to make it part of her grief work. She shared that she had been thinking about it but wasn't sure. And then she asked, would I consider going with her? Now, I had never danced outside of weddings or a rare night out where dancing was part of the evening's event, but never a lesson, never a style of dance learned. I barely knew the steps to the hustle, the most popular dance when I was growing up. Then I remembered my list of 3, bowl, golf, walk, and how dancing was nowhere on it. Nothing that increases the cardiac load echoed through my mind. And I told her that I couldn't do anything that was fast or required too much exertion. She pondered. And then she said, well, what about tango? I knew nothing of it outside of its occasional portrayal in a movie. Scent of a Woman and Mr. and Mrs. Smith came to mind. A passionate dance, she explained, but one whose steps were no more vigorous than walking. The intensity of this dance was all in the hold, in the symmetry of movements, in the connection between partners. I must admit, I was intrigued. But where in God's name would we find tango in our little town of Red Bank, I asked. She said she would call the local Fred Astaire studio and see if anyone there was teaching tango lessons. I immediately recoiled, could taste the bias building in the back of my throat. Just the name Fred Astaire conjured images of 80-year-olds dancing tango with out-of-shape, should-be-retired, sweaty dance teachers whose touch would make me want to go home and shower. My interest instantly waned. She would look into it, she said. Thankfully, the discussion ended there, and that was that, or so I thought. A few days later, I visited a local eatery that I'd been going to for many years. As I crossed the room to the self-serve counter to make a cup of tea, I noticed a flyer hanging on the side of the display case that abuts the counter. I could not believe my eyes. There on the flyer were two figures entwined in a beautiful dramatic tango pose, rose in mouth and all, and the flyer read, Argentine Tango Lessons in Red Bank, Beginners and Beyond. You've got to be kidding, I whispered under my breath. My mind was reeling. I immediately called my friend, who was equally surprised, and told me to call the number on the flyer and get more information. I caught Joyce, the dance group coordinator, as she was breathlessly boarding a train for New York. I explained that my friend and I were interested in more information about the lessons. She asked if either of us had dance experience, and I shared that my friend did, but that I had none. Well, why don't you meet me at the Milonga at Buenos Aires on Wednesday night, and we can talk more about it. She explained that a Milonga was a social dance, but that there would be a brief dance instruction, live music, and a dance demo by two professional Argentine tango dancers as well. It sounded wonderful. I asked if I could come and just watch, and she said, absolutely, and that would probably be best. I arrived at the restaurant for my first ever Milonga. I was surprised to see how many people were streaming in for tango, and on a weeknight. This restaurant was only blocks from my office, and I had no idea of what took place here on the first Wednesday of every month. It was like I had stumbled upon a secret club. We were joined at our table by 4 other women and 2 men, all of whom were now bent over, changing shoes. Ooh, this is serious, I thought, as I looked down at my clearly inappropriate ankle boots. We exchanged hellos and pleasantries, and when they asked where I danced, I explained, well, I'm a complete novice, only there to watch, but that my friend, though out of dance for a while, had an extensive dance background, lest they should question our presence. The women balked. There would be no watching, they explained. Everyone had to dance, if only for the lesson. Suddenly, my friend bent over to change her shoes, too, and I realized I would be the only person in the room left sitting when the lessons began. And so, succumbing to peer pressure, a lifelong habit, I joined the long line of people, men behind the male instructor and women behind his female partner, as the lesson began. I swear, we were taught 3 moves, had approximately 2 seconds to digest them, and the next thing I know, the male instructor, in a thick Latin accent, began to bark, "Now, grab a partner!" And with that, the crowd instantly dispersed from their carefully delineated gender roles, like cockroaches darting from the light. I was horrified. I didn't want a partner. I wasn't ready. I was only here to watch. I looked over at my friend for help, but she was already moving toward the other side of the dance floor with a man who was leading her by the hand, her back toward my panicked face. Before I could scramble off the floor, a man in his 60s approached and extended his hand, taking my now shaking and sweaty palm in his. My heart pounding. But what about my cardiac load, the voice in my head protested. Fear isn't on my list of 3. I wanted to retract my hand, to run back to the table. Wasn't that dinner being placed down? Shouldn't we all eat first? I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of all these people. I didn't want to ruin his nice shoes. I didn't even get a chance to give him my disclaimer. I knew. Before the music began, and he pulled me closely to him, forcing my arms into the position I saw on that damn flyer. The apologies began almost immediately. But by then, the instructor was yelling out a series of orders, including, "No talking! Dance is about feeling, not talking!" And "Let the rhythm take you!" The rhythm? What rhythm? Holy shit, what was I doing here? Our Latin drill sergeant began counting off in numbers that between his accent and my anxiety sounded like words I had never heard before. His lips were moving, but all I could hear was wah, wah, wah. My head was spinning. Breathe, damn it, I kept telling myself. Next demand. Look into your partner's eyes. Tango is all about connection. You cannot connect with a floor. My eyes reluctantly rose to meet my partner's, eyebrows set in a permanent expression of apology, sweat pouring from every gland. Next barking order, feel his lead, feel it, and you cannot go wrong. Maybe I could finally hear the music above the pounding of my own heart. Maybe it was the eye contact. Maybe I just surrendered to a situation that I realized I could not get out of. But suddenly I could feel by the way his body moved, by the way his weight shifted, which leg was coming toward me, and I began to move in time with my own backstep. I could feel how his fingers, pressing slightly into my mid-back, were like the turn signal on a car, allowing me to sense when he was going to shift direction, and slowly my body began to respond in kind. Above all, I began to notice the smile that was now fixed upon my face. At first, a nervous smile, then an apologetic one, but now a smile of pure joy, and I could not make it stop. It was then that I realized how very long it had been since I had smiled that kind of smile. I felt an intense aliveness coursing through my body that I had not felt in a very long time. Tears began to well. I danced for so many hours that first night that my ankle-booted feet finally revolted and I had to call it quits. I stepped on shoes, apologized repeatedly, and offered every man who extended his hand my disclaimer, "I'm totally new." But not one of them retracted the offer. They all smiled kindly and said, "Then let's keep the steps simple." Mostly, I remember the smile. It lasted all night and into the next day. I could see it in my eyes as I caught my own reflection in the mirror. But more than that, I could feel it in my soul. I didn't realize how much I missed this feeling of pure joy radiating throughout my whole being, and how long it had been since I had known it. I now take weekly tango lessons with the Red Bank Argentine Tango Group. I am not particularly good, but I am completely filled with joy. I dance with Michael and Shock, Andrew and Ron, and occasionally even my husband will humor me with an awkward spinner on the dance floor. The health issues that robbed me of my former life persist, but today I have found a loophole in an otherwise passion-stripping diagnosis. Bowl, golf, walk, and tango. Ole. Here that is dedicated to my husband, whose name happens to be Rocco. And yes, that's his real name, called Sunday Morning. Eyes half open in a still dark room, brown faux suede walls and windows flanked by Moroccan and gold and saccharine drapes keep the sun's rising rays at bay just a bit longer. Duke, the bulldog keeper of my secret fears and tears unseen by human form, curls deliciously into the small of my back, a gift of unconditional love from life herself. A new day has dawned. In the silence, the rhythm of my husband's breathing becomes the metronome to my heart. And then I hear him stir. How does he do that, this ever sleep-deprived man? How does he know my eyes are open before my body ever moves? Back to back we lay, and yet he senses my moves, my moods, my longing. Coffee, he offers. A slow, affirmative purr slips from barely parted lips, and equally slowly he rises. It seems now, after 25 years, our circadian rhythms are perfectly timed. After years of missed tides and moons, finally aligned. He smells like love, like safety, like a warm summer breeze, the manifestation of childhood dreams, the promise fulfilled by the God who never left my side, the knight who would save me from darkest nights. He does not push nor pull, but neither wavers, steady as a rock. He is my rock, my lover, hero, home to my heart, co-creator of a life so deeply savory. Home, yes, we have finally found our way home. Oh, how I relish Sunday mornings. Two more pieces and I'm done. This next one is called Sweet Spot, and it's an homage to my love of writing. Whispers, like gentle breezes from me to myself, beckon my return to this familiar place where waves of peace wash over me as senses adjust to absolute stillness, to the sacred space beyond outer world, to the place in which I truly come alive. The whoosh of life mingles with distant stirrings, thoughts and feelings heightened and flattened, coursing through me like a great river rushing out to sea, the undulations of a hungry soul who will no longer wait patiently in the shadows, simmering and then bursting forth in words on page. The bitter sweetness of life revealed as the deep freeze begins to thaw, the writer becomes untethered, unencumbered, unafraid, and memories begin to uncoil. Fingers dancing on keys are my symphony, urging me upward and onward, finding my way out, where truth and love, fact and fiction, pain and hope all peacefully coexist, where consequences are no longer my concern. The writer has emerged. The story is revealed. The lies are shattered. Truth takes center stage. Come what may. And last but certainly not least is a piece written for my mother, who passed away December of 2011, very unexpectedly. My mother was, she's of Irish descent, which I think means that writing is in her blood. And it is a gift that she has given to her family. She shared her stories with us that could keep us riveted. She shared her poetry. I have a collection of my mother's poetry, and it's my intention to publish it posthumously. My mother, as magnificent as a writer as she was, never wanted to present it publicly. She didn't even want to send it out for publication because it was just too private. So in some ways, my willingness to do this is sort of like carrying both of our voices forward. It's called Ode to Mom. Never again will your familiar form pass the threshold of my home. You who are so known to me, whose very heartbeat is ingrained in memory as my own. Irreplaceable you, gone from sight but not from thought, not from heart, not from the very cells of my being. I steal your scent in the scarves that adorn the doorway of my bedroom. I listen to your guidance as I fumble with familiar recipes in a rarely used kitchen. I feel your essence as I write these words, writer to writer. For this is the legacy that you would bequeath, and this is how I honor you today. In the words that become poems and essays and novellas, a merger of talent and voice in memory. You are free from suffering, from uncertainty, from the weight of a life that had begun to wear you down. And what you left in your place are your words, the poems and stories shared throughout a lifetime and stored in my soul. The songs that would sing me to sleep on dark nights, carry me forward into a new day. This is your legacy, Mom. These are the riches left behind for those you cherished. You who are loved for all eternity and missed beyond words. Your voice is the source from which my words now flow, writer to writer, heart to heart, soul to soul. May peace be yours, Mom.